Wonderful. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to DAG's September 2023 monthly meeting. My name is Eli Storch. I chair the Design Advocacy Group, and it's good to have everybody here today. When we're in person, as we will be a number of times in the next few months, we go around the room and everybody introduces themselves. So if you could do that in the chat, who you are, why you're here. I don't know. I usually have a good question for you to answer. We'll do something about sports. Your favorite, the favorite game match you've ever seen at a sports stadium. Why don't you throw that in the chat and introduce everybody, or introduce yourself to everybody rather. So while we're here this morning, we've got a lot to cover. DAG has been busy preparing events and activities and some upcoming advocacy work. So let me pass it around the room a little bit. David Brownlee, do you want to kick us off with a little bit of advocacy?
Yeah, I just want to probably remind this audience that on October 13th, the full Historical Commission will vote on the unanimous recommendation of its designation committee about the historical designation of the Police Administration Building, the Bob Geddes designed 1960 building that began its life as a symbol of civic reform and progressive architecture, but spent much of its life under the dark shadow of Philadelphia's abysmal policing record. And the question of the way what the use that we can make of that complicated history and the great building that's connected with it will be before the Historical Commission as a sort of first step on October 18th. DAG will be, we believe, we are working to come up with a statement about that designation. Look for it in an e-blast coming out sometime in the next week or so.
Wonderful. Thanks, David. Let me swing over to George. Do you want to jump in here?
Sure. I want to just comment that the last day for comments on Bus Revolution is Saturday, and that will be comments online. And there are a number of strange and interesting things. The 42 route, Frank, is proposed to move off of Walnut, Chestnut, and move south. I believe it's Spruce Pine. And I was told by Marcia that they actually were not even planning to have some stops at the University of Pennsylvania Hospital, but I'm sure that's being corrected. The number 49 will not be going to Center City on its way to West Philly from Fairmount. It will go directly over the Spring Garden Bridge. And the 32, which is kind of nice for people coming back from the Kimmel Center to the Art Museum area, that disappears. That was a nice one-seat ride that probably disappears. It appears that the designers have favored frequency of service above all, and maybe have neglected some of the very popular one-seat rides, but I leave that up to individuals, and I'm sure there's tons more of challenging difficulties. Just another thing to mention that we're kind of soliciting some opinion on is that there's a very interesting battle going on, a preservation battle on Walnut Street, where the residents of an overbuild are complaining about another overbuild that is proposed directly adjacent to their overbuild. And if anybody has comments on that, I would love to hear them, as we don't have a policy or a statement on this yet. That's it for me. Thank you.
All right. Well, thanks, George. One other item I wanted to bring up on the Chinatown Stitch project. There are 3 options that have been proposed. The city is taking comments and feedback on that. I wanted to share the link in the chat so that folks can jump on there and give their feedback. I posted the Bus Revolution link as well. If you want to go back and see the DAG conversation that we had at our monthly meeting in person, There's a couple links there that I just put in the chat that you can jump on to learn a little bit more about the history and the context of the Chinatown Stitch project. And yeah, go make your voice heard about that one. So if anyone has any items that are coming up, events, meetings, advocacy pieces, anything you want to share with us, please throw them in the chat. I'll call you out to come tell us about them. I want to also say that during the event, if you have any technical difficulties, Nika Faulkner, who's on here, or myself, there's two of me, the one that says host. If you message that one, I'll do my best to help you out. But we'll keep everybody on mute and should have a good presentation. Now, I mentioned a lot of upcoming stuff. Marcia Moss, do you want to give us the rundown on upcoming events at DAG?
Yes, thanks, Eli, and hi, everyone. The co-owner of the Philadelphia 76ers, David Edelman, and Gensler's managing principal of architecture, Jordan Goldstein, will be joining us next month on October 19th at 10 a.m. As you all know, the 76ers have proposed to build a new arena that will serve as a long-term sustainable home for the team. And as they anticipate a world-class experience for fans. And on the very next day, mayoral candidate Cheryl Parker, who, if she wins the election, will be our 100th mayor and the first woman to lead the city. She'll be in conversation with Emmanuel Kelly in person at the Center for Architecture on Friday, October 20th at 4 p.m. And on November 2nd at 6 p.m., we'll be welcoming Anne Fedulin, who recently resigned as Philadelphia's Director of Planning and Development. That'll be an in-person fireside chat at the Center for Architecture. And then in December, on the 14th at 9:30 a.m., Nick Anderson, who's the ED of the Parkway Council, will be introducing the Parkway Design Workshop, the team to discuss the future plan to reimagine the Parkway. So that's it for now. Eli?
So we usually do a quiet round of applause at the end. I'll give my own to Marcia for her dedicated work. Thank you so much for keeping our calendar full. We certainly appreciate it. And thank you to Emmanuel Kelly for his work to help set up that interview, a one-on-one conversation with Cheryl Parker. One note, Marcia, that David Edelman is not an owner of the Sixers. He is spearheading the stadium project. So just clarification there. So as we dive into it today, we will have a Q&A and a conversation at the end. So as you have questions and comments and thoughts, please keep that chat busy. I posted a link to designadvocacy.org. We have widgets on our homepage for events. We have an events tab. You can go on there and sign up for future events. We like it when you register for in-person events. You don't have to, but it lets us know how many people are coming and how many chairs to set up. So please register for those events. And we are now on the record recording all of our meetings, both in person and these Zoom meetings. So those recordings are all available. If you go to our past events pages, there are links that are added to all of those over the past 2 years, which with the one exception of Calder Gardens, which moving parts, they asked us not to. So anyway, without further ado, let me pass it over to steering committee member David Brownlee, who's going to introduce our speaker and help moderate the Q&A today. David?
Thanks, Eli, and welcome to you all. I'm very, I first of all want to say that as you probably expect, we've also extended an invitation to David O to join us and have it for a discussion about his vision for the city in the future. And we're working on that with his staff at this time. It's my really great pleasure, professional pleasure, personal pleasure, to introduce Inga Saffron, who is a national treasure. But a special treasure, especially treasured person here in Philadelphia. Philadelphia is blessed to have a a research-oriented, story-following daily newspaper, and even more blessed in our circle. I know we agree to have an architecture critic on the staff of that newspaper, and Inga is that person. Inga began work in Philadelphia on the Philadelphia Inquirer in the 90s, moved to Moscow and served as the Inquirer's Moscow correspondent through much of the tumultuous middle and later 90s. Back in Philadelphia in 99, she took on the responsibility of being the architecture and, more broadly speaking, the built environment critic for the Inquirer. Her work is notable in a number of ways. One is simply she, as I think the joke is a good looker, that she's out looking on the streets for things that are interesting and worth and demanding investigation and understanding. And she's also distinctively non-parochial. Philadelphia is a place that needs to be compared with other great cities all around the world. It's not just a Philadelphia story. Her work, her journalism has received a Pulitzer Prize. It's been nominated several times, but only won once. Won the Pulitzer Prize in 2014. Many of her essays have been put together with new material in a book published in 2020 called Becoming Philadelphia: How an Old American City Made Itself New Again. And what she's going to be doing today is speaking with us and introducing us to what she thinks are the questions that we should be asking about the proposed Sixers arena, which certainly sets us up for a series of continuing discussions over the next couple of months as we move forward on that. Inga, if I missed something that you'd like to say about yourself in introducing you, please add it now. And let me just say, please put your questions in the chat. And I'm going to ask Nika to help. I will make an effort to sort them, but Nika, as I go through them, if I'm missing something, I count on you to come up with the things that I've missed and put them in front of us. And I, of course, will be consolidating questions. If there are several questions about the same thing, I'll be blending them together. Inga, it's over to you.
Well, thank you, David. That was very, very kind. I think that you said enough about me. And I just want to say good morning, Dagsters. And I would normally say thank you for inviting me to speak about the Sixers arena proposal, except that this is such a fraught topic that I may regret it later. But that said, Eli, could you put up the title screen in the share the screen thing? Thank you. So you'll know the title of my talk is questions we should be asking about the Sixers arena, and I chose that rather than why we should or should not build the arena, and there are reasons for that. And you know, first, I feel that Chinatown has dominated the discussion so far, and I totally understand why. Chinatown is more than just another neighborhood. It's one of Philadelphia's great cultural treasures. So it's really important that we understand the potential consequences of the arena on that fragile place. But Market Street is a great cultural treasure too, and one we've been tinkering with rather badly for decades. It's a crucial business corridor, and what happens on Market Street affects the economic health of the whole city. And so because so much of this conversation has been about Chinatown, I feel that we as a city have not spent enough time talking about how the arena would impact this crucial retail, healthcare, and transit hub. And, you know, we've also seen kind of a rush to judgment based on not very much information. You know, there's a very strong pro-arena crowd, and the discussion is often framed as, you know, do you want $1 billion investment or a dying mall? As if those were our only two choices. You know, the city hasn't yet released a planning study for the arena or for Market Street, yet City Council and our presumptive mayor seem ready to hand the keys to the Sixers right now. So, just full disclosure, I'm not completely agnostic on the arena. I don't generally like super block buildings, especially ones with very few active uses facing the street. We have the convention center just a block away, and that is another huge building stretching 3 blocks. And while it may have attracted a lot of people from afar and a lot of investment into the city's overall economy, you can clearly see that it's done very little for Arch Street and for Broad Street, which are on the perimeter. All that said, I'm open to hearing more from the Sixers. And I think the most important thing right now is that we have a fact-based, rational discussion of all the pros and cons for a decision that will change downtown Philadelphia forever. And to get the right answers, we need to ask the right questions. So can I have the next slide, Eli? So I want to start at the beginning, and just ask the question, why do the Sixers want to build an arena on this particular site on Market Street between 10th and 11th Streets? And the Sixers have said from the get-go that they want their own venue where they can control their own schedule, make more money from concessions, naming rights, etc. That's fair enough. The Sixers are a business, and making money is what businesses do. But the Sixers say this project isn't just about making money, and they claim the project will have a public good, and that it will revive a failing retail corridor, save this mall, and give a boost to SEPTA. And I think it would be naive to accept those claims at face value. The Sixers' proposal is clearly a real estate play, with the arena serving as an anchor for some larger project that has yet to be revealed. Can we have the next slide, please? So let's recall that only 3 years ago, the Sixers made a very detailed proposal to install an arena on Penn's Landing. And that proposal also included a huge amount of retail, housing, even a public school. I'll just point out that transit was really never mentioned as a motivating factor. The next slide, please. The Sixers didn't win that bid, and it seemed clear that they turned to this site instead for some, very, very practical reasons. First and foremost, it's a high-profile venue, a site that no one can miss. But as part of the mall, it comes with an existing underground truck ramp, which is located at 9th and Arch. And, the value of that truck ramp shouldn't be underestimated. Being able to unload big tractor trailers underground is really crucial if you're going to host concerts or ice-capades or whatever other big events might be scheduled there. Next slide, please. So why did the Sixers pick this block when there are 2 other blocks of the Fashion District? And I just wanted to point out it's the only block where the Sixers could attach another parcel, the former Greyhound bus station, to assemble a site that was big enough for the arena program. This site is a little under 5 acres, which is just barely big enough to fit the bowl of the arena and all the other things you need, like egress stairs and back of house. The middle block wouldn't have worked because I think it would have been difficult to gain control of the city-owned parking garage behind it. And also, Macerich has a very good tenant, an office tenant, Jefferson Health Partners, on the upper floors, and they're a solid rent-paying tenant. And then the third block to the east includes the historic Strawbridge and Clothier building. So that one was out. So this is really the only block of the mall that would work for this proposal. can I have the next slide? And we know that Market Street is part of a what they call a sign district, which means the Sixers are allowed to plaster the exterior of the arena with a lot of digital signs, just like the gallery did, and just like these market development did. And those signs are really gold mines, because they generate a lot of revenue, and you can use that income to obtain financing on good terms, and as part of your business plan, that you will have that stream of revenue coming in. So those are some of the practical reasons, and yes, there happens to be a big transit station in the basement, which is not to be discounted. So my next sort of big question is, will the arena make Market Street more vibrant and viable? The Sixers say that it will replace this dying shopping mall and attract more people and re-energize the corridor. And so let's examine those claims. We know that the Sixers play about 40 home games a year. And scholars who study the sports industry estimate they're likely to book another 40 nights a year for concerts and other things. So for argument's sake, let's round that up and say there are 100 active nights a year. Now, the Fashion District, I don't think it's open every single day, but let's say it's open roughly 360 days a year. We've heard people say that, Market Street is dead, the mall is dead, and, that's really very much hyperbole. I spent an afternoon there yesterday in preparation for this talk, and it was really pretty lively. I mean, not as lively as the suburban malls of my childhood, but definitely not deserted. And I counted 30 retail and food tenants in that one block where the Sixers want to build the arena. And, those retailers included two very large fashion stores, Primark and Forever 21, and mall brands like Ulta, Kate Spade, American Outfitters. There's also an AMC movie theater, around one bowling alley, an experiential art exhibit called Wonder Space. And yes, it is true, there's a lot of vacancy on the ground floor, but what was interesting to me is that the concourse is almost fully tenanted, and the second floor actually has more tenants than the ground floor. And I can't tell you the reason for that. So how does what's there now compare with the day in and day out activity of an arena? I think the next slide would be good. The Sixers, they've put out this floor plan for the ground floor, and it shows 10 retail spaces with two of the store lots facing Market Street. Most of these retail spaces look pretty small to me, almost kiosk size. And I think it's reasonable to assume that several of the tenants will be sports related, which means that they'll probably be patronized mostly during games. And other than the two retail spaces at the Market Street corners, it's not clear to me how many of the others face outward onto the public street. So most of these retailers will have to be accessed through the corridor, which the Sixers say will be a public corridor, an internal corridor. Now, people coming to the games or concerts might patronize other nearby businesses, not just these businesses, and that would definitely be a good thing. But again, going back to the convention center, we know it's really hard for small businesses to survive when the major anchor is not open every day consistently. So one way I'd like to phrase this question is this. Will 10 businesses and an arena that operates 100 days a year attract more pedestrian activity to Market Street than 30 businesses that are open 360 days a year? So I think that sort of boils down the comparison. The next photo, please. So as you probably know, the Sixers have proposed an apartment building on the site. And how much activity will this building add to Market Street? Well, apartment buildings are a good thing. They're occupied, 24/7, 365 days a year. Unlike the apartment buildings across the street in the East Market development, this building would create a permanent population of people who would shop in the stores and use the train station. And that is a very good thing for Market Street. So the next question is, how likely are the Sixers to actually build this tower? We know that this block of the mall was originally built to take an overbuild at the eastern end of the building near 10th Street. Can you show the next slide? This is a photo of the original model for the gallery. And you can see on the left, what's now a Jefferson Hospital building was originally a building for Reading Railroad, I think, and then the Aramark. Anyway, so the original towers were proposed on the east end of the block, away from the train station. The Sixers Tower is in a different location, essentially over the site of the former bus station. And, when this project was first proposed, I interviewed David Edelman and I asked him about whether the Sixers plan to build residential towers as part of the project. And at that time, he told me that the NBA forbids putting towers on top of arenas. Maybe we'll go back to the previous slide. Yet, now we have a rendering showing the tower on top of the arena. Then there's some other issues. Adding a tower into the mix is likely to complicate an already very complicated construction project. We know that the Sixers need every inch of this site. That's why they acquired the Greyhound site. So it's going to take some incredible engineering gymnastics to construct the arena just by itself. It's over an active rail line. And then if you add in a tower, it's not going to make the project any easier. And I would say for these reasons, I have my doubts about, whether this is a serious proposal or, just something that looks good in a rendering. So can you go to the next photo and the photo after that, Eli? Thank you. So speaking of the train station, how will it be impacted by the arena? Jefferson Station, formerly Market East, is SEPTA's second busiest train station, and it connects with everything: the Market Frankfurt L, the trolleys, buses, Patco. It's the linchpin of the entire transit network. And I think it's also quite beautiful. It's a 3-story volume with this nice glazed ceramic mural and natural light that filters in from both Filbert and 11th Street. I think that light it's one of its most distinguishing features. And, just think about how different the experience will be, how different the experience is here compared to Suburban Station, which has no natural light. So in a number of community meetings, David Edelman has said that the station will not be compromised by the arena. And I think this claim really beggars belief. First of all, we know that the Sixers want to enlarge the existing box. They want to cover Filbert Street and extend the box to Cuthbert Street. And that would mean roofing over Filbert Street. And once that happens, there's no more natural light coming in from those north windows, which you can clearly see in this photo. Secondly, the Sixers say they plan to elevate what we call the Arena Bowl to the second floor. But any large seating area for 18,000 people with that kind of load has to be supported with an extensive array of columns. And so my question is, where will those columns land? Will some of them have to be dropped into the space now occupied by the train station? And where and how many? And can they show us that this is not our Penn Station moment, that this is not going to do what Madison Square Garden did to New York's Penn Station. There's another issue we should be concerned about regarding the station, and that's how the Sixers can construct the arena without turning off the electricity and disrupting service on regional rail. And for context, we only have to look at what happened when Brandywine built the FMC Tower next to Amtrak's Northeast Corridor. Now, FMC does not sit over the tracks, merely next to them. But even so, in order to build that tower, Amtrak had to turn off the electricity on the entire Northeast Corridor. And since obviously they needed to keep the trains running, the only time that was feasible was late at night between 11 p.m. and 4 p.m., I think. Brandywine had to pay its workers triple time during that period. And I wonder, are the Sixers prepared for that kind of complication and the costs of those complications? So back to the issue of reviving Market Street. Do the Sixers have plans for other projects nearby? We haven't seen them yet. And we can't judge the Sixers' claim that this project will revive Market Street until we know those plans. And, are there housing towers? Are there other retail uses? We do know that Macerich and Preet own I think the 1000 block of Market Street on the south side. And they've been effectively land banking that block for several years. Do the Sixers intend to build on that site? What do they intend to build? Do they have a master plan for the future of Market Street, similar to the one they offered at Penn's Landing? Next slide, please. I wonder if anyone recognizes this image. It's an office tower that was proposed for the surface parking lot at 13th and Market, designed by SOM for a developer in 2013. And I show it because there's been a long history of speculation on Market Street. And, it's one reason why there's so many parking lots and blighted buildings on the street. Even as neighborhoods like Fishtown and South Philadelphia and West Philadelphia have really exploded with new development over the last decade, two of the most transit accessible sites in the entire city, sites you think would be incredibly valuable and developable, have sat vacant. And I'm talking about 8th and Market and this site at 13th and Market. Both these sites have been vacant for more than 50 years. And so the question is why? And I think one possible explanation is that the owners are holding out because they keep being told there's a big payday coming. Back in the 90s, it was Disney Quest, then it was a casino, then it was another casino, and now it's the arena. So, why would you rush into something when maybe you could make a lot more money later? So one of my questions is, if the arena is approved, what can be done to prevent the owners of these sites from continuing to sit on them for another 10 years? And then again, if the arena is approved, how will the construction impact Market Street and Chinatown businesses? The renovation of the gallery took more than 3 years. It was extremely disruptive to businesses. to people who worked in the area. This arena will take even longer to build given the engineering challenges. What will happen to the tenants in the fashion district, to businesses in Chinatown? How will commuters get to their trains? Another question, the Sixers want the city to strike a full block of Filbert Street, effectively give them that land. I'd like to know how much they intend to pay the city for that. It's valuable real estate. Next slide, please. You know, as I mentioned, the site, even with the Greyhound terminal portion, is just big enough to accommodate the arena. And so far as we know, there's no room for any sort of plaza outside the arena like this one at the Barclays Center in Brooklyn. And it's not just a matter of having, you know, a nice amenity where people can hang out and tailgate. These sorts of spaces are really important in helping to manage the flow of people coming in and out from the games. And since, you know, it appears there will be no plaza like this, will 10th and 11th Street have to be closed before and after games? If so, how will that affect Jefferson's emergency room, which is, you know, from the north reached by 10th Street? You know, how will it affect traffic patterns in the city? You know, how much will it cost the city to close those streets? So I want to talk about the issue of transit and whether the Sixers really can convince people to take the train, and whether those numbers, those increased numbers, will have a meaningful impact on SEPTA. So the Sixers say that 20% of their fans now take transit to the sports complex, and they estimate that that number could rise to 50% if they move to Market Street. Perhaps they are being overly optimistic, but I just want to say I'm one of those people who believe they can indeed improve their numbers with a downtown arena. And then the question becomes, you know, will the increased transit ridership meaningfully help SEPTA? Based on my interviews with transit experts, you know, it's not a bad thing, but it's not a game changer. You know, I also want to talk about automobile traffic. You know, if let's say, you know, 60% of the, you know, 18,000 fans drive, you know, I take the view that Center City can handle that volume. It'll be coming from several directions, and the drivers will be dispersed to a wide variety of garages. And if the Sixers follow through on their plan to have fans pre-book spaces using an app, I believe that traffic can be managed. You know, after all, tens of thousands of people already come into the city for big events like the flower show. Now, there is a downside in that if the Sixers sort of reserve spaces in garages close to the arena, that means those garages will be there forever, and they will never be redeveloped for a higher and better use. You know, while you know, it's my belief that the city can handle the traffic, do we want to handle it? And what are the implications of accepting it? Let's move on to financial issues. The Sixers say that once they complete the purchase of the site, they will gift the land to the city, and then they will lease it back for 30 years. So I want to know what's in it for them with this arrangement. And I have talked to some people about it, and you know, one of the reasons for doing this, well, there's a lot of reasons, but they won't have to pay property taxes. And generally, with such an arrangement, the tenant will create a pilot, a payment in lieu of taxes. So I want to know, is that pilot the equivalent of what their tax obligation would have been otherwise, or would it be less? Pilots are usually less than the normal tax burden. Then there's another issue related to this. Right now, the average lifespan of a basketball arena in American cities is 30 years. And this is one of the reasons that the Sixers want to leave Wells Fargo, which is just about 30 years. So my question is, what happens in 30 years if the Sixers tell the city they want to build a new arena in another location? Will the city be stuck with this outmoded box that can't easily be repurposed? On their website, the Sixers say they also want to create a tax incremental financing district, a TIF, to help pay for the arena and other improvements. And a TIF essentially freezes property taxes at the current level before the improvements are made. And if they create a TIF on top of the pilot, that means neither the city nor the school district benefits from the increasing land values in the TIF district, which could include parts of Market Street. So I think a question we need to ask is, will this arena generate enough other taxes to justify these two big tax breaks, a TIF and a pilot? So, a lot of people have been asking, are there other sites where the arena could be built with less disruption? And people keep pointing out 8th and Market. And I've been told that that's a very problematic site because right now it's an L-shaped site, and that's not a good shape for an arena. It's too small for the arena. And the only way to make that site big enough for the arena would be to demolish the former Gimbel's Annex at 8th and Chestnut, which is historically protected. So I did have one idea, which I floated in a recent column, and that is the site south of the Roundhouse. It includes the former Roundhouse parking lot, and then a huge block that has been a surface parking lot since the 60s, when the area was leveled for urban renewal. There are only 3 buildings on that site beside the Roundhouse. There's this an old industrial building that houses Children's Village, which is a daycare center that serves Chinatown. There's a 1-story federal security building, and there's the African American Museum, which is now slated to move to the area around Logan Square as part of a redevelopment there. So, it's possible that the Children's Village could be relocated, and the federal security building either incorporated into an arena project or relocated. That site is slightly smaller than the site at 11th and Market, but I want to point out that the SEPTA concourse runs under 8th Street to the Ridge Avenue spur, and so you could have a transit connection on that site. It also happens to be closer to 676, closer to Patco. There's a very large city-owned parking garage at 8th and Arch. The Roundhouse could be repurposed, perhaps as a hotel or some other development. Franklin Square could be activated during games, and people could gather there. I also think this site is more buffered from Chinatown than the 11th and Market site, because there are several large institutional buildings on 8th Street. But this is just an idea. And in any case, because the Roundhouse is being put up for sale, there should be a master plan for this whole area. Maybe, one master plan for Market Street East and this site. So let's say the arena gets approved. What are the things that can be done to protect Chinatown from gentrification and other real estate turbulence? So one, I would start with, the question, can the area be downzoned? Which would make it harder to, have tear downs and very large buildings. Could it be designated as a historic district? It should be a historic district. There's a lot of concern about rising rents. So could the Sixers allocate a portion of their promised community benefits to buy housing vouchers for Chinatown residents, which would stabilize their people's living situation? So conversely, what happens if the Sixers don't build the arena? What happens to the fashion district? The Inquirer reported recently that Macerich and Preet have filed financial disclosures saying they will default in January unless the Sixers buy the building. So I just want to say, a default doesn't mean the mall closes. The tenants are still there. They're still paying rent, presumably, and people are still shopping. And so, bankruptcy is reorganization. So the business will be reorganized. Secondly, if it does go into bankruptcy and the property is sold, it would be sold pretty cheaply. And maybe it would be cheap enough for a housing developer to buy it. And imagine, another East Market style development with hundreds of residents on Market Street. As we've seen on the Avenue of the Arts and North Broad Street, where the Phillies wanted to build a ballpark 20 years ago, there's been a lot of housing construction, and nothing revives an underperforming street like housing. So there's one final point I want to leave you with. The Sixers have said it will take 10 years to build the arena, and that's exactly the time frame for the development across the street, East Market. It took them 10 years to build an urban scaled mixed-use development with 2 apartment buildings, offices, retail, restaurants, and streets, the exact same amount of time. So I think we have to think about this for the long term. Thank you.
Inga, thank you very much. Appreciate you jumping in. David Brownlee, if you want to, I know that we have some questions. If you want to come in here and help us moderate. One question that I wanted to sort of kick the conversation off with was, David Edelman has talked about the TD Garden in Boston as more of an analog for what they're trying to do than the Barclays Center. I know George asked a similar question about that arena. So do you have thoughts on the connection between the conditions of those 2 arenas, the proposed versus the center in Boston? And then are there other successful urban arenas that your research has landed you on that should also be studied and considered?
Well, I'm not an expert on the TD Bank Center arena, but I have looked at it a little bit, and that's in a much more edge condition. It's definitely not in the center of Boston. They built a deck over those tracks. I think those tracks are pretty open. So, there are many instances of building over active rail. Hudson Yards in New York is another one. It's not an arena, but it was a deck over a rail yard. So it can definitely be done. Actually, in Boston, the Prudential Center, I believe, was built over a highway or an active rail line as well. So, you know, there's lots of history to doing this. It's just not an easy thing to do. And this is a very constrained urban condition. So, you know, even Hudson Yards is on the edge of the city, or the edge of the built up city of Manhattan. So I would say that, you know, I've looked at a few other arenas like the LA arena. You know, that's 10 acres. There are, you know, the Sixers say there are lots and lots of downtown arenas, and that's absolutely true. But very, very few of them are in a old traditional part of the city with very narrow streets like ours. So that's all I'll say about that.
Okay, Inga, thanks very, very much. I've put a link in the chat to Dag's position statement on the Sixers arena that folks can take a look at. But I didn't want to say anything about it to preempt this discussion. There are a number of questions that are coming in. Some of them have already been answered in the course of what you said further. There was a great deal of interest in thinking about other sites, and I think that your analysis of the alternatives is very interesting and thought-provoking. Question comes in from Julio Binjaku, who simply asks, as an architect, why is the design so bland? It looks like, you know, it looks like nothing more than, and he doesn't mean this as a compliment, the 2013 SOM design. Why do we have a building that looks like this in this day and age?
The arena building.
Yeah, the arena building.
Yeah, it looks very 1976 to me, the whole red, white, and blue thing.
Right.
You know, I have no idea why they put that out there, but I will say, well, renderings are just marketing. They're not real designs in many, many cases, most cases. And this rendering, I mean, just like the tower, I don't think that tower is buildable. So why did they put it out in the rendering? You know, it's a marketing thing, and it's a psyops.
Yeah. Well, and I sort of wonder about the residential being tucked up there in behind the project, even if presuming it could be built, and away from Market Street. Deborah Kodish adds that when talking about the flower show parking situation and seeing that as a comparable, notes that the flower show goes on for days, and people drive in and out at the same time. That there is that kind of impact comparison that can be made there.
Well, with the flower show, they're probably coming in. It's probably staggered. They're probably coming in at all times.
I'm sorry. That's what she was saying. Goes over days, and people don't all drive in and out at the same time. Sorry, that's exactly
that is very true. And I have been on the trains in the flower show, and I've seen huge numbers of people coming from the suburbs on the train. So people really do use the trains.
Well, and I remember when it was in West Philadelphia, and basically it had to occur when Penn was on vacation because it couldn't be accommodated any other time. I mean, giant things can be accommodated, but they take giant accommodations. George Claflin notes that you mentioned Barclays and TD as possible comparables, talking particularly about the adjacency of additional urban space. Any other stadiums, downtown stadiums, there are lots of them, that you think are particularly successful or that give us a model for this?
I mean, I know people love Camden Yards in Baltimore. The baseball stadium in Seattle is very nice. The one in San Francisco, but so the baseball stadium in San Francisco, again, it's not in the very, very center. I mean, we're talking 2 blocks from City Hall. We're talking about a city with colonial era streets. Yes, Market is one of our wider streets, but our city is not like these Western cities. Those Western cities have very wide streets. They don't have the kind of density in their downtowns, even if they have high rises, they're not as fine-grained. I just think our city is very different than a lot of these comparisons that are being put out there. And we should remember that an awful lot of these so-called downtown arenas are not at the very center point of the city. They're more on the edge of downtown. I think TD Bank Center is like that. It is nowhere near old Boston. It's quite a hike from Family Hall.
Yeah. So there are a number of questions that we go back to this same challenge of what happens during the 300 nights a year that nothing is happening in the
200, let's say.
Yeah.
250.
Okay, so what happens then? And there are questions specifically about restaurants and the places that sort of depend on a lively street life to make people want to come to them. I thought your analysis was very interesting of saying, that right now there are about 40 active storefronts in the gallery, and what happens when you
That's just in one block.
Yeah,
I was only counting the number of businesses in the block that the Sixers would occupy. There are many more than 30 in the gallery itself.
Yeah. No, I mean, that was fat. I thought that was I too have been surprised at how successful the gallery, which candidly, I also sort of love to hate, is how much of it is full, how much of it is active, and that what it would be like to have basically a mall with under the stadium with less in it. There's all this talk. The number of people have taken up on the theme of the disruption during the construction and those but there's an additional question too about basically the environmental cost of this. Demolishing a building to build another building that, as you say, may have a lifespan of only 30 years or so. How do we face that these days?
If we were really serious about climate change and fighting climate change, we and everybody else, other cities and countries would make many different decisions. Obviously, there's nothing less sustainable than duplicating what you already have. And you could argue, if you're right that they'll get more people taking transit, that's a more sustainable thing. That's a good thing. There is transit to the sports complex. And for some people, they can walk there or bike there. We might be asking, what can we do to make that a more attractive option? Make transit more attractive. What can we do to give the sports complex a sense of place and get rid of some of those surface parking lots and put real buildings there?
Yeah, I think, what you say about the decades of vacancy on the adjacent sites, not that they're big enough to take the arena, but that the arena really can't be considered without as a success unless something happens on those sites as well. I apologize for the grandfather's clock here. No, I don't at all. I love it. There are a number of other arenas that have been suggested for comparison. Capital One Arena in Washington, which had and there's the other clock going, where there is the adjacency of a Chinatown. And the question of Chinatown does come up on a number of these. And I thought that your suggestion that what do we need to do to protect Chinatown? One person has stated it doesn't seem that anyone's listening to Chinatown. I would say it seems to me that a lot of people are listening to Chinatown, and Chinatown's voice is being heard very clearly. You said specifically you didn't want to take that up too much, but what are your thoughts in wrapping this up about Chinatown? Someone said, so what would happen if this was going to be built next to Society Hill?
Right. you know, one of the problems with this site is that it comes right to the door. It's this big hulking thing over one of the most important streets of Chinatown.
Right.
And it's really hard to mitigate that back wall. I mean, they proposed this tower in an effort to do that, but I don't know if they can build the tower. So this is why I, floated this idea of this other site. It still gets them a downtown arena, the Roundhouse, let's call it the Roundhouse site. It still gets them a downtown arena, but I think it's way more buffered from Chinatown. You have on A Street, you have the Temple Podiatry School, you have a PennDOT building, and then to the west of that, you have this giant Bell Telephone building. You have the Metropolitan Apartments, you have the park, and so it has these big buildings buffering it from the most active part of Chinatown. I think it would be less of a presence there. And then, the other things I mentioned to mitigate gentrification, making it a historic district, downzoning, creating a pool of vouchers, rent vouchers for people. Basically, I mean, Chinatown's as I said, an incredible treasure. I mean, Washington, D.C. did not have a Chinatown like we have a Chinatown. This is a real living place and a unique cultural heritage. And, that's really, really valuable in this time when everything is becoming so homogenized and cities are becoming so much alike.
I think so. I mean, I think that's one of the striking things that I hope comes out of this is that how lucky we are, how much richer we are to have this vibrant cultural community very close to the center of our city. And in this discussion, I mean, I must confess, I really had never really thought about how close the Chinatown gate is to the gallery. And, to what can we do to actually make more of Chinatown, to bring it more clearly into public view and to bring economic activity to it in a kind of natural and organic way. That sort of depends on East Market being revitalized as part of this as well. There are a number of there are a couple of comments that I think were interesting. One is a suggestion. Well, maybe only in Philadelphia would we consider the present stadium sites not part of downtown. That we basically that's what about making more of that site as an alternative?
Oh, I totally agree. I guess one of the problems, since those are such auto-centric, the sports complex is so auto-centric, and everyone arrives at the same time for the games. It's hard to have structured parking. That's why they have those vast fields of parking. Supposedly it's easier to drive into a flat parking lot than into a multi-story one. And so therefore they haven't been willing to give up any land for other kinds of buildings. That's a problem we should be able to solve, I think. I've been told, I don't drive to the sports complex, but I've been told it can take a half hour or longer to park and get out. And it seems like a nightmare to me.
Eli, do you want to make that point you want about transit?
Oh, no, I think these are really good questions that are coming up. Harry, I believe the Sixers have published breakdowns by zip code. I'm looking on their website now. I'll drop a link in if I see that.
Harry Bodek was asking where people come from, where attendees come from.
So Inga, I wanted to ask you something which has come up in many of our conversations, both internally and professionally. What documentation are you looking for when you're evaluating a proposal? You mentioned the fudgeability of renderings. Those of us who have worked and made renderings and evaluated renderings understand that. But I think, can you sort of explain that more generally? And when you're taking on a new project of any scale, what documentation are you looking for? And what specifically would you like to see for this project to help you understand it more realistically?
So you're talking about architectural documentation,
Yes.
right? So I heard there's a term for when they put out renderings like those. It's called ghosting. One of the really striking things about those renderings is there are no buildings around the arena. At the 11th and Filbert corner, at the opposite corner, it almost looks like there's a plaza when we know there's going to be no plaza. The area in front of Market Street shows all these people gathering. Well, we know they can't gather in front of that building. So, our architects always say this, it helps that let's see the plans, let's see the elevations. They have a lot more information than renderings. Renderings are just pretty drawings, and often they're inaccurate. So we need to see that. I mentioned the issue of, the structural columns that will support the second story bowl. Where will these columns land? How much room in the station will they take up? How much, where will they be inside that ground floor public space? What will that experience be like? I want more detail on how many of those retail spaces will open onto the street. So, I don't think they're there yet in terms of design. So maybe it's a little early to be asking for that information. But I think it's really crucial to see it, especially if this is approved. And, we should not underestimate the difficulty of building over the regional rail station. The complexity of keeping the trains running while construction is taking place. Can you imagine? It's, our whole regional rail system is interconnected through that station. How could we possibly turn it off? How would people get to Paoli or, Temple University or wherever without that station?
Yeah, there's a little bit of a sidebar conversation among people talking about just how good the gallery is as it is, that it's better or not better since the renovation. And I think that you do highlight, the opportunities that these kinds of buildings can, in some context, provide. But I do, to go back to your first statement, that you in general don't like super blocks in cities, and that is certainly a thing that runs against it. I have one question that I have had about this from the beginning. Is it seemed to me that from the start, one of the big values of this site was the Jefferson Station that they chose to bury. Another value was the way that it was woven into the street grid, but they chose to kill a street in the course of doing it. And the third, it has a movie theater, which is a pretty precious and I guess pretty successful thing. I'm not sure what your take on that was. And I was surprised that they didn't somehow come out as a place where even when the Sixers weren't playing, you'd go in and out of it every day on the rail. They'd make it a railroad station transit, and that would stream traffic through, and a movie theater. And you could begin to think about this as a more complicated, multi-purpose urban place.
I mean, I suppose theoretically, if they were to build this, they could move the movie theater to another part of the gallery, and presumably Macerich would want to move all the tenants and condense the gallery. I don't think enough has been said about Health Partners, which is a Jefferson entity, occupying all the upper floors of the middle block, and presumably they have a lease, and presumably it's a valuable lease, and Macerich doesn't want them to go away. That takes away a lot of retail space. There's not much left after this block. This is the most successful retail block in the gallery. So, we just don't know what's going to happen to all these retailers. Can they fit in the rest of the gallery? I kind of doubt that the arena would be able to fit a movie theater, but it's worth asking the question. Yes, in theory, it's a good thing for the the station to have, for the train station to have an attraction, another attraction that people are going through the train station. I guess another question to ask is, how will the concourse be treated during all this? Will it be re-tenanted and repopulated? It's very complex. I can only imagine that the ownership structure of all that stuff below grade is incredibly complex. The city owns some land, SEPTA owns some land. Who knows who else owns some land?
So a couple of questions about sort of the details of where we are now. One question is, so what do you reckon the potential bankruptcy would really mean? I mean, you talk about things maybe continuing on, but is this a thing that will require rethinking the project? Do you think that we're at that point? And the other question, another sort of similar question, is, what are you looking for out of the impact analyses that the city is commissioning but is paying for with money from the developer?
Yeah, I'm not a financial journalist, but I mean, we've seen lots of companies default, reorganize, continue on with their lives. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. I believe if they defaulted, those tenants wouldn't shut their doors the next day. I think those stores would continue to operate and pay rent. It would make it, perhaps bankruptcy would make it more difficult for the Sixers to buy the property while it was in the courts. Perhaps they'd get a better deal, because perhaps another buyer would get a better deal. I mean, I've heard it said that the land is too expensive right now for a housing developer to buy it. If they were buying it 10 cents on the dollar, maybe a housing developer could afford it. I don't really know. I'm just guessing. I don't think it. I think it's hard to predict how it would go. But I think it's safe to say that the mall would not shut down the next day, that it would continue to operate through the reorganization.
And is there anything particular that you're looking for out of these studies that have been commissioned?
Well, just basically a lot of the things I talked about. What are the physical impacts on the train station, on the street? Will the streets have to be closed during games? I would like to see a really independent economic analysis of whether, 10 stores in an arena is better than 30 stores in a, so-so shopping mall. And I want to know what else the Sixers have planned for Market Street, because right now we're just evaluating 10 stores, an arena, and one tower that I don't believe can be built. So that's not revival. I want to see what else is being planned.
Laura Spina in the city planning department pointed out in a discussion I had with her a little while ago that what we are celebrating in East Market, the development on the other side, was actually you know, proposed as part of the master plan for Market Street. You know, there is a plan. Having a plan isn't a bad idea if you're trying to revitalize something.
Right.
That,
I would love to see, you know, I wish this was being driven by the city and not by the Sixers. And if we look at Barclays, where there has been a tremendous amount of housing construction, that was a city initiated plan. I mean, okay, the city owned the real estate, but the city drove that planning, and they were able to, you know, issue guidelines and benchmarks, you know, for affordable housing. And I would, you know, I would feel much more comfortable with something like that.
Yeah, there's several people in the chat who have lamented the fact that the city isn't standing up and claiming what it ought to be in this setting.
Right.
There are a number of people who've just added to the list of structural and technical challenges that it faces, including HVAC for all this buried activity and equipment, and very complicated egress and pedestrian access requirements of multi-occupancy buildings with huge
I just want to say
crowds.
two things about those points.
Yeah.
One, if you look at the rendering showing the 11th Street side of the building, you will see a huge vent. It's the same vent that's there now. And the second point I want to make is one of the reasons that the gallery had so few outward facing stores is because, you know, this is a building that has a train station and an underground concourse. So you needed egress for all those people. You had upper floors of a shopping mall. You needed egress for all those people, and all those stairs and all that ventilation ate up a huge amount of the perimeter. So with an arena, it's the same story. You need a lot of egress. You need a lot of ventilation. It's not just an arena, it's an arena on top of a train station. So, you know, it's really, really hard to design that in an urban friendly way, because you have to take care of all that life safety stuff first, and then maybe you have a little real estate left at the corners.
Yeah. Eli, Nika, do you see other questions in the chat that we should be putting up?
I had a Colin Fanning had made a comment sort of asking you to address the bit of feuding that's been going on between Comcast Spectacor and the Sixers about the current arena and about the whole stadium district as a whole. And there were a few comments about, you know, if they need to leave, building another stadium down there and making a mixed use neighborhood out of the stadium district. Do you have thoughts and specific comments either, you know, either on that feuding or on, you know, the viability and desirability of the stadium district as a more mixed use neighborhood for Philadelphia?
Yeah, I mean, I can't really comment on whether that's a good arena or not, or, you know, whether they should stay or not. I mean, you know, obviously Comcast Spectacor has its interests, you know, financial interests, and the Sixers have theirs, and, you know, that's just negotiations. But from a public point of view, absolutely, the sports complex should have housing, should have hotels, should have retail. It should be a real place. And now that you mention this, I have been to the soccer stadium in Barcelona. No, sorry, Madrid. I was in the one in Madrid, which is in the center of a fine grained neighborhood, completely surrounded by housing. Of course, nobody drives there. You know, if Americans live differently, we could make these better places. in Europe, there are loads of arenas and stadiums in the middle of residential neighborhoods, and they work because there's no expectation that you'll drive there. And they have, much more robust transit systems.
So another question that I think is interesting to talk about is, what are you looking for from the forthcoming third-party studies that the city is going to be releasing at some point in the fall?
In fairness to Inga, I should say that I just asked her that, but
Oh, I'm sorry. I was reading questions. Let me jump up. Nando Macaulay, do you want to jump in and ask your question? I think that's an interesting one to. Sorry about that. You're muted if you're talking, Nando.
we can repeat that question for her.
Yeah, I'm trying to pull it up.
Yeah, I am too.
Appreciate all of the questions, but do you think bankruptcy and reorganization is an opportunity to rethink the mall completely, including leases, and think about a larger redevelopment effort that could include an arena?
Well, what I said before, I mean,
but the Jefferson.
So a reorganization. If maybe somebody better would buy it.
Yeah.
Maybe the it would be sold at a fire sale, and national development, which did East Market, would buy it, or somebody like them, and build housing. I mean, I've written this, so I think I can say this.
Yeah.
We're in a retail apocalypse. Market Street will never be the kind of retail street it was, back in its heyday. But I think, it's a perfect place for housing towers. People don't want, people freak out about, high-rise buildings in their neighborhoods. Well, this is a perfect place to put them. And there's such great transit. And when you bring people, you bring consumers, and they shop in stores, and they support retail, and they support transit. I would love to see that as the future of Market Street, an urban residential street.
Michael
So
Grinley
when you say better, it's about use and type than individual judgment. Yeah.
I'm sorry.
When you say a better developer, I was just clarifying that you meant more about the use being proposed across the board.
Yes.
Michael Greenlee has put the 2009 Market East plan in the chat, a link to it. It's the city planning document. I mean, it does show a much greater mixture of uses, and prefigures what happened in East Market. An interesting thing to think that we are capable of planning, but funny, it is strange that the city is playing such a passive role in this project, especially when it involves so much of the public sphere, including public transportation.
Yeah, I do believe there's a lot of conversations going on quietly behind the scenes.
Yeah.
All right, well, I think that's probably a good place to wrap it up. This is the first of our sort of back-to-back Sixers experience here at DAG. So if you want to go on your camera so we can give Inga our round of applause, as we typically do on these Zoom meetings. I certainly appreciate you joining us today, and sharing your thoughts with us. Please sign up, come back on October 19th. We will be talking with David Edelman, who Marcia was right, he is a 10% owner of the team. I was focusing more on his role of developing the project, but he is also a part of the ownership group. So apologies for that misstatement. And then the next day, in person at the Center for Architecture with Sherelle Parker. So that's a big week for DAG. Register for those events, and we look forward to seeing everybody in October.
And let me just chime in and say, please go to your bookstore, go to the bookstore, and buy a copy of Becoming Philadelphia, Inga's book, written by our own favorite Pulitzer Prize-winning architecture critic. Thank you very much, Inga.
No, my pleasure. Thank you for having me, and I'll be eager to listen to the next installment.
Thank you very much.